Hey gang, excuse me, Uncle Todd here, and this week's Strange New Worlds. After 4 episodes of extreme drama and tension and all that, we get a comedy episode. Hi Taz. It starts out they're going to be examining a anomaly that's on one of the moons of a planet near Vulcan, and because Spock does not get to Vulcan very often, his prospective in-laws, T'Ping's parents, are wanting to have the engagement ceremony. So once he gets back from the mission, that's what they're going to do. Unfortunately, he and Nurse Chapel, as they try to take their readings, discover a anomaly and some kind of vortex, and then they crash. Spock wakes up back on the Enterprise, and they're told that the shuttle was just drifting in space near the Enterprise. And something has happened to Spock. He's completely human. And he is experiencing all those human emotions at once. Basically, he's turned into an adolescent. A lot of emotions just coursing through him. So they manage to postpone the ceremony due to his injuries. And we get a bit of a montage of Spock laughing at jokes, eating until he gets sick, and exploding on Sam Kirk for his slovenliness when they're in meetings. It is something to see Spock scream out, "I will end you, Kirk!" But they cannot rework Spock back to half Vulcan. There was basically what they refer to as a calling card from the aliens that had prepared them, and it did have a code on it that you could then contact them. And when they do, they find out they had crashed, been injured. It was the beings in the vortex. They felt responsible. They repaired them, and they sent them back. And that's it. They have no more contact. So Nurse Chapel is trying to work on a cure or something. And eventually, so much time passes that they have to have the ceremony. Kirk's mother appears on the Enterprise. Spock's mother appears on the Enterprise. And Spock shows up wearing a beanie with a little Starfleet insignia. But she knows something's wrong and pulls it off, and she decides her best bet is to have him train for the ceremony so that he can pass it as a Vulcan, even though he's now human. And it is tough, and he doesn't think he can do it. But eventually, they've got no choice. They've got to. So, T'Ping and her parents come. Spock wants to tell T'Ping about the problem, and he starts to, but he can't bring himself to do it. He doesn't want her to carry the burden, as they say. So, Spock does pretty well throughout it. The only problem is they're going to have a mind meld. Now, while this has been going on, Chapel talks Uhura and Ortega into taking her back to the vortex where they get in. And Nurse Chapel, in a back and forth with the entities, manages to convince them that they indeed made a mistake and they need to correct it. Meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, to stall for time, Kirk says that because Spock is half human, they have to have part of a human ceremony with this Vulcan ceremony. And it is charades. But luckily, Nurse Chapel shows up with a hypo full of, I assume, DNA that will correct and change Spock to what he is, or what he originally was. And it's not immediate. His ears won't start growing, and he's still got some emotions running through him. But the ceremony ends, and T'Ping's mother, who has been insulting the entire time, says just one more insult too much. Basically saying that she's surprised because no one human could possibly get through the ceremony perfectly. And Spock is more Vulcan than she believed. And he just snaps, pulls his ears off, and tells her that he is human. That's what his injury was. And he did perform it perfectly. And just basically goes off on her and then storms out. And then we get a bit of a sad moment here. Because although the engagement is official, T'Ping is rather put out by the fact that Spock did not tell her. She has told him she accepts everything about him, his Vulcan side and his human side. And the fact that he could not tell her is disconcerting. And she suggests they take a break from each other. Well, this leads to something very interesting. Because Nurse Chapel goes to see Spock. And as they are talking, he starts to explain about some of the emotions he was feeling. And then Nurse Chapel grabs him, kisses him, and then they move over and downward out of camera range. So, maybe Spock and Nurse Chapel had a dalliance. Maybe they continued having a dalliance after the original series episode Amok Time, too. Who knows? Very good episode, especially considering how heavy the last four were, that you get like a little respite with a very funny episode. It's almost slapstick in some of the earlier scenes where Spock is experiencing all that human emotions have to offer. When he ate so much bacon, he got almost sick. And Luann having to explain to him that he is basically going through human adolescence. And that's why he's having all these troubles. Because basically, having not gone through that kind of an experience when he was younger, he's not prepared for the onrush of emotions. And let's face it, we've all gone through adolescence, and it all is tough. All those hormones pumping through you. You're happy one minute, screaming the next. Yeah. Oh, and your sex drive is just going crazy. You can't even... Now, I was back in the 80s, and I had trouble just watching sitcoms sometimes. You know, I mean... well, we won't go there. But I had a major crush on Bailey Quarters from WKRP. I know everybody goes on and on about Lonnie Anderson, but I always had this thing about smart women. Anyway, really good episode, a lot of fun, and a very necessary light episode so that things don't get too heavy throughout the season. Well, that's about all I got to say about this one. Please hit like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.